was wandering around Fullerton, California, and I found this house with a nice little orange grove, and I thought it'd be a great place to talk about the EG Bali 500EX. 500 because it has a 500 watt internally geared rear hub motor that is sort of geared for speed. So 500 watts, you think that's powerful. This one is fast, but when you start out, it's a little bit like, there's almost like little hiccups if you are going from zero, because the motor, it's kind of struggling, it feels like. And because it uses a torque sensor, you kind of put in a little bit more effort in order to make it go. At the highest level of assist, there are 5. It's pretty responsive and stuff, but this isn't a cadence sensor, so the power is more immediate, but there is a tendency for this system, if you just kind of relax your foot on one of the pedals and you're not holding the brakes, it can kind of start to go, but then on the other hand, it sort of stutters out. So it's an interesting combination of choices they made here. I thought this one was more expensive than the other EG that's a speed-pedelec. I think it's the Milan. It looks very similar. They're both $21.99, which is an awesome price considering that it's got fenders, they're just plastic. It's got lights. The front is integrated, both Spinninga. The rear is not. It uses 2 AA's, but still, it's nice. It's got a big reflector built in. It works pretty well. There's even this rack, and the rack is kind of, it's interesting. It's a little bit wider than I'm used to, and even the tubing seems a bit larger. Maximum weight, 25 kilograms. So it's about 55 pounds. This thing would be a great commuter, and the difference between the Milan and the Bali is really that this one has a suspension element in the rear. It looks like K-Speed Storm. On the website, it called it something else, and I mean, I don't know. Kind Shock, I think is what it said. It's very, very basic, and even this swing arm design here, I don't know a lot about it, but the weight difference between the two bikes, which are very similar in size, this is about 19 inches on the seat tube, is about 3 pounds. So this is a 65-pound bike. That's very heavy, in my opinion, for kind of a city commuter type of bike, really for any electric bike. And I think the reason is that it's got all these accessories, and that maybe the frame isn't made as lightweight of material, and even some of the, the bars and tubing and stuff. The suspension fork, I'm imagining that this is oil. It's a little bit narrower and stuff. It seems like it wouldn't be too much extra weight, but just SR Suntour Nex E25. It does have lockout. I like that. But just, and it matches too. That's cool. But just maybe a little bit of weight there, and then probably the battery pack. So this is a 48 volt, 10 amp hour. So it's almost a half a kilowatt hour of energy. That's impressive, but it comes at a cost, which is weight. And depending on the quality of cells that they're using in there, apparently they're Samsung, but there are different grades too of energy density. I think that's just adding a lot of weight. You can even kind of see the design here. On this side, it just looks like a tube, a down tube, although it's a little bit fatter. And this side, it actually bumps out in order to fit that battery. So it's not quite symmetrical. I noticed the frame on the Milan was a little bit flexy. This one I think has some flex just because there's the rear suspension, but it's done all right. They feel similar, and you do get some comfort. I'm always talking about like my back and neck feeling a little bit sensitive, especially when I'm riding long distances at high speeds over really crappy roads like they have on this street, where you'd be like, really taking it. Or if you have to go off the sidewalk onto a piece of dirt, like here, you can see that there's like the selective path people are walking, then there's a sidewalk on the other side. So a bike like this can handle it. It's not a trail bike, it's not a mountain bike, but it is full suspension. So it's I love the idea of it. In practice, there's some gripes, like back to the motor not feeling perfect. This is a 27-speed bike though, so you get 3 rings up front, and then you get 9 in the rear. Shimano Alivio. So a couple steps up from the base model. That's decent. It goes something like Shimano Tourney, Shimano Altis, and then Alivio. So again, it's not their highest end, but it's all right. There's no quick release or anything on the rear wheel, and you're going to have to do some work if you get a flat and you have to take this off, because it's got the disc brakes, and then there's the shifter cables and everything over there. The brakes themselves, they are mechanical, 180 millimeter. They don't work super fast in my experience. It's a little bit like smooth, slower stop, Tektro Aries. It might be the pads that are on them. They get the job done, but maybe a little bit lower end. You can see right here that the plastic cover for the button is kind of coming off, and a lot of things about this bike feel a little bit cheaper. I don't know though. The seat was pretty comfortable. The suspension's nice. It's a trade-off to hit that price point. semi-ergonomic, like ergonomic grips here. This one you can see it's just like cut so that they could fit the trigger throttle and the brake lever, and then they put the shifters out here so they wouldn't collide. And I noticed that the trigger throttle was up higher than I'm used to. I like to have it down here, but there wasn't room because the housing is sort of colliding with the brake levers. Okay, so this is a little bit of a crowded cockpit, and you can see over here too the button pad for changing assist level and for powering it on and everything. It's been spaced way in because these trigger shifters are closer. Well, I rarely shift with these. I shift a lot more with those, but on the other hand, I want to use my trigger throttle, so it's a trade-off. You could potentially swap this all out and customize it yourself. I just think at the end of the day, you're dealing with kind of a more crowded cockpit because this bike has so many gears and because it has assist and throttle and everything. And I like that. Like, don't get me wrong, it's awesome that it has pedal assist and that you can override it at any time with the throttle, and the throttle gets you up to 20, and then pedal assist goes up to like 28. They say 30 on the website. I haven't really been zooming too much, but yeah, it's definitely a speed pedelec, and I think where this bike really shines is at those higher speeds. And if you're commuting, that's fantastic. It's nice to have that. This model is a little bit quieter than the Milan because they went with more of a bash guard, like just a plastic chain cover versus a complete chain cover where it goes all the way back here. That was rattling around a lot before. They do have a quick disconnect here for the motor, so if you have to do that maintenance, you just cut the zip ties and then get out your tools. The front wheel does have quick release though, which is really nice. So if you had to transport this in your car, or I don't know, just reduce the weight for a rack, hanging it off the back of your car maybe, you could take that front wheel off, and I totally would take the battery out. I think it's like 7.4 pounds. I was weighing that earlier. So you still have a 60-pound bike even without the battery, which is just like, that's a lot. That's a lot right there. And again, just the materials, I'm not an engineer, so I can't say for sure, but I did weigh it, so I hope that helps. This is the silver color. It also comes in matte black. Cool that they have a couple different colors, but there's only one size, and as I was saying, it's about 19 inches. A little bit of a further reach. So they've got some spacers here to raise the bars a little bit, and then they've got this really short stem that's adjustable angle, so you could bring it up a little bit more on kind of a low-rise bar just to bring it up. But you could potentially have that dust. Yeah, we got a little friend coming by here. So you could potentially swap out the bars or whatever, bring them back, but it's more of a speed, more of aggressive bike for getting around town. Yeah, I think I've covered most of the aspects that make this unique. I do love that they've got the reflective sidewalls on those wheels, and I talked about the lights earlier. It's really nice to have that, just to have a larger visual footprint. I think I'd prefer the silver color myself, just so I'm more visible in traffic. The fenders, they also seemed a little bit more rattly. They're plastic, which means they're a bit more resilient than steel, probably a little lighter as well, but they're still, it can bounce around a little bit like that. No water bottle cage because there's not really room here. Maybe they could do something here, but it's already kind of custom with that battery in there. And I do like that at least the battery's kept low and centered on the frame versus like a rear rack. So that's cool. If we walk around to this size, I wanted to show an up-close shot of the battery again and talk about this double key slot. Okay, so there's one key slot for the battery. Stick it in here, if I can get it in, and then you twist it and you have to pull, and you pull pretty hard. This thing's kind of stuck in there, so it's not something I can do with just one hand. There's an on-off switch here. It doesn't matter if this is on or off to work the bike. I think it lets you activate this little LED power meter. If you click it off, now that doesn't work. So maybe this is like a complete kill switch to avoid phantom power draw. You can charge the battery on or off the bike. It's got the little rubber cover right there. This is what the charger looks like. It's 1.5 pounds, which is kind of average. 2 amp output. You can unplug this cord on the one side to make it a little bit more compact if you want. I do like that. But then you have to take these keys out, put them in here, twist it to on, and you have to leave them, right? So they're jingling around potentially. Thankfully, they're pretty much out of the way when you're pedaling. You're not gonna bump into them, which is nice, but it's just another little extra kind of like in the way. You could still get hit, and the jingling is not something I'm a fan of because, on the one hand, you don't want to lose the keys, so you connect them to your keychain. But then if you're on your keychain, you have a whole bunch of keys here, so you need a carabiner, but this isn't super wide, so then you have, it's just like, I wish you didn't have to leave that in while you were riding, is what I'm getting at. So we take the first step, insert the key, turn it to on, then we hold the power button here on that ring. The display comes to life. it is a fixed screen, okay? So it's not really something you can take off. You can kind of angle it, but it doesn't swivel easily once you've tightened it down. Monochrome, got a few little readouts here. Speed at the top, battery level, 4 bars there, and odometer and trip distance. You can switch between those by pressing the power button again just briefly, so total or trip. And then assist level. And there are 5 assist levels and 0. So in 0, it's like cycle computer / throttle only mode, which is cool. And then you arrow up higher and higher. You're gonna get more assist using that torque sensor, which I believe is right in there. And that's cool. At any time, again, you can still override. So you could be trying to maximize your range on this thing by riding around in levels 2 or 3 and then boosting yourself. But again, that only works below or at 20 miles per hour. So, you know, there's just some trade-offs. To get those lights going, I think you hold the plus button for a couple seconds and then boom, that comes on and the headlight comes on. And I should not have said lights because it's only the front light. That backlight, and you have to press it, and it's got 2 AA's. These ones might be burned out, okay? And that's a great example of like, it's easy to forget and then it just shines forever and the battery dies. So don't let that happen. Try to check that. I think that's kind of it. I think that's it. We should hop on this thing. I do like that it's got the e-bike specific brake levers from Tektro that have the extra wire for killing power to the motor. That's like a motor inhibitor is what they call it. You can see the cables are a little bit messy up here. You know, I've got them zip tied, and they do sort of run through the frame right here and that down tube, but then you've still got some of the shifter and brake cables a little bit exposed. So it's, you know, it's a definitely purpose-built frame, but there's some room for improvement on some of this stuff. And again, I think the big takeaway is it doesn't cost as much. So you do get performance and stuff, but it's not a super good climber, and there's some rattling and some of those other complaints I mentioned. Yeah, I love the kickstand down here. It's doing a pretty good job. It's adjustable length, so you can go in there and tighten it up. Let's just cruise over here. A little bit bouncy on that rear shock. I don't think there's a lot of damping control. Okay, I'm gonna go up to level 5. Very responsive because it's a cadence sensor. Whoa! Using those disc brakes. This time I'm gonna check out the throttle. And we are at just about 20 miles per hour, so it kind of fades out. I like that it doesn't just like immediately cut. It's a pretty smooth operation with that throttle. And again, we're using that right over assist mode, which is wonderful. You don't have to like reach out and press any of those buttons. And again, it'd be kind of difficult to because they're so far. So I think they've done the best they could with so many things up here on the bar, and it works well enough. Things I meant to mention when we were talking about shifters is that these ones are kind of tough. Like, you really have to push down to shift up on the big lever. It's kind of like, you know, I don't know if it's because the cable's going a long way or because they use too tight of a cable wrap, but it's definitely harder than some of the other e-bikes I've reviewed. I think now I'm going to do a grass test. I'm just going to point the camera at the motor, start from 0 on the grass, and give you some idea of like the power, because again, I think this thing is geared more for speed. Even though it is rated at 500 watts, it's really most effective at higher speed. The other thing I was talking about is, if I come to a stop here and then I put my foot down, if I give it a little bit of torque, the bike's gonna run away unless I have that brake lever squeezed. So just keep that in mind. Definitely some trade-offs with torque sensors. This isn't the only bike that does that. It's just something I like to call out so you can be careful when you're riding. I do like that they went with a heavier duty 13 gauge spokes in the front, 12 in the rear. So the lower the number, the thicker they are and the more sturdy they are. And again, given all the weight on this bike, I think that was a good choice. So yeah, I think that's about it. That's the EG Bali. Again, they have the Milan, same price, more of a hardtail setup with a little bit of a step-through design. I call it a mid-step. It's not super low, but that one could be more approachable if you, if that's a little bit daunting. There is the rear rack, so try not to clip your shin on that. Be careful for sure. Feel free to chime in with any comments that you might have about these questions or concerns to help other people out. I have measured it, and I included the reach, the standover height, the length, all that stuff back at the website, ElectricBikeReview.com. Of course, ride safe.